approach the bench to get the evidence that
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. But it was not murder. What happened that night was a tragedy. It was an accident, but it wasn't murder. Danny Dawson, Taylor Hobson, and Vanessa Sullivan all left the bar that night after celebrating Vanessa Sullivan's 21st birthday. They walked out of the bar and they said goodbye to Jordan James. They said goodbye to their waiter. They said goodbye to the other people in the bar. As they were walking out, no one tried to stop them. No one tried to take the keys from Danny Dawson. They walked out into the parking lot and they walked by Miss Sam Lyons. Miss Lyons told you, Mr. Dawson is not someone who drives drunk. She told you he's a person who takes a cab ride home when he's had too much to drink. She asked him that night. She said, Danny, do you need a ride home? Danny didn't say yes. Neither did Taylor or Vanessa. And that's because everyone knew that Danny Dawson was okay to drive. He got in that car, he got behind the wheel, and what happened that night was not because of alcohol, but because of the conditions. We heard today that it was raining that night. Mr. Dawson, he's driving home. He's driving down this road with no streetlights. There's no oncoming traffic. There's no moon. There's no stars. It's raining. It's raining really hard. There's a flood warning that night. And it's difficult for Mr. Dawson to see. He's driving down the road. He's got the windshield wipers on. They're going back and forth as fast as they can. And as he's driving, he sees a deer come out into the road. Mr. Dawson, he swerves to miss that deer. He drives off the road. He doesn't panic. He doesn't lose control. He doesn't slam on the brake. He doesn't make an immediate maneuver. Instead, he maintains control. He maintains control of that vehicle for 124 feet. He maintains control of that vehicle around the most dangerous part of the curve until it's safest for him to come back onto the road. He tries to do that. He tries to steer the vehicle back onto the road, but it's too much that night. He lost control. And that's why we're here today. We're here to determine if what happened that night constitutes murder. The prosecution was right. They had a burden. They had a burden to prove to you two things beyond a reasonable doubt. First, they had to prove to you that Mr. Dawson, that he was guilty of first-degree murder. And they also had to prove to you that he was guilty of driving under the influence of alcohol. Now, they had to prove these things beyond a reasonable doubt. And beyond a reasonable doubt, well, that means that if there's any reason for you to doubt anything that happened in today's trial, Mr. Dawson should be found not guilty. I want to take a closer look at what they had to prove. They had to prove that he was reckless, and they had to prove that there was an extreme indifference to human life. This first part, reckless. The judge is going to instruct you that that means that he had to consciously disregard the risk of murder that night. They have not proved that. They have not proved that beyond a reasonable doubt. They have shown that Mr. Dawson, that he was given the opportunity to take a cab, that he knew that he was okay to drive. That if he had been too drunk to drive home, he would have taken that cab. Now, they tried to argue that Mr. Dawson was drunk that night and that that's why he was reckless. But do we have a reason to doubt that? Ms. Smith, the person who conducted the blood alcohol concentration test, admitted that it was probably wrong. She stood there on that stand, their own expert, the person that they brought to prove to you that Danny Dawson was drunk, admitted that her test was probably wrong. She said that the result was .19, but she didn't follow her own checklist. She didn't fill out the observer name. We don't know if Mr. Dawson was observed correctly that night. She understands that. That's why she said that her test could probably be wrong. And then we heard from Dr. Norton, who explained to us the problem of these ratios and the assumptions that the prosecution's expert made that night. She assumed this. She assumed that these 2 blocks, was Danny Dawson's blood alcohol concentration level. But Dr. Norton explained to us that it was probably this. There's 1 block in this container, and there are 2 blocks in this one. That is why the prosecution's expert said that her results were probably wrong. Another thing that they keep bringing up is that Mr. Dawson was speeding that night. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that may be true. That does not prove recklessness. That does not prove extreme indifference to human life. If a person is speeding, they're not guilty of murder. They're not guilty of driving under the influence of alcohol. In order to be guilty of driving under the influence of alcohol, they have to prove that he consumed alcohol. They have to prove how much he consumed, what his blood alcohol concentration really was. They did not do any of these things. Do we have reason to doubt how many drinks Mr. Dawson had that night? We heard from the bartender. He told us that he only served Mr. Dawson 6 or 7 drinks the entire time he was there. He was there from 2 o'clock in the afternoon till 12:30 at night. 6 or 7 drinks during that span of time does not prove that he was drunk, does not prove that he was reckless, and does not prove an extreme indifference to human life. In order for them to prove an extreme indifference to human life, they would have had to prove that Mr. Dawson not only disregarded the lives of Taylor Hobson and Vanessa Sullivan, but that he disregarded his own life. That when he got into that car, he disregarded every human life in that vehicle. They proved that beyond a reasonable doubt. Rather than giving up when Mr. Dawson drove off the road, rather than making an immediate maneuver, or overcorrecting, or slamming on the brakes, he fought. He fought to save lives when he drove off the road. He fought to maintain control of that vehicle. That's not indifference to human life. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end of this trial, you're going to go back and you're going to deliberate. You're going to look at these jury instructions and you're going to have to decide what happened that night was murder. While you're doing that, I want you to look over all the evidence that we saw here today. I want you to look at all the things that I just talked about. And while you're doing that, I want you to ask yourself, is there reason to doubt this? Is there reason to doubt that Danny Dawson was drunk that night? Is there reason to doubt that his actions constitute murder? What happened that night was not murder. Find Danny Dawson not guilty.